Hello, I'm Daniel King, and it's August 4th, 2020. If you're watching this, then you're watching the recording. If you'd like to participate in this talk and to give me feedback or criticisms, you can, the way that you could do that is go online to meetup.com and join my Meetup account called Elk Grove Meditation. I live here in Elk Grove, and the Meetup group is called Elk Grove Meditation. If you join that account, then you'll get notifications about when I'm going to be online, and Zoom links that you can join, so we can see each other and talk. Last week, I talked about the Four Noble Truths as taught by the Buddha in meditation and the benefits of seclusion in supporting our meditation practice. The Four Noble Truths are essentially, they're the foundation of the Buddhist teachings. And they are essentially that ordinary beings like you and I experience suffering. That's the first noble truth. The second noble truth is that suffering has causes. The third noble truth is that we have some control. We have control over those causes. We can affect the causes of our suffering. And the fourth noble truth is the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the path that the Buddha prescribed to end suffering. So last week, I sort of glossed over the second noble truth, the causes of suffering. Essentially what I said was, the cause of our suffering is our negative thinking patterns. And I didn't say too much more about it. And when I watched my recording, I thought about that, and I thought, somebody's going to need a little bit more detail than that. So when you talk about the causes of suffering, the Buddha, he gave us, with respect to that, he gave us, well, let me back up for a moment. When the Buddha taught 2,600 years ago, he was teaching in northeastern India, and his audience was Brahmin priests and ascetics. Ascetics are people who had renounced all their possessions other than maybe a begging bowl. And really, ascetics their purpose was to become enlightened, was to become free from suffering. And Brahmin priests were the priests of the time and the culture. So the Buddha was teaching these people. For them, karma, they had a cultural belief in karma. The Buddha did not have to convince them about karma. It was already there. And so essentially, and karma applies to the second noble truth because it essentially means that actions have consequences. So actions are what I think, what I say, and what I do. They have consequences. Bad actions lead to suffering. Good actions lead to happiness. What are bad actions? It's no great mystery. Not too far different from the Ten Commandments. Bad actions are, for example, killing, stealing, abusive speech, divisive speech. Basically, those kinds of things that human beings worldwide understand to be negative and harmful. So essentially, when the Buddha was teaching to the people of his time, they already believed, for the most part, what he was saying, that there is this cosmic law. Karma is this cosmic law, which means that actions have consequences. It doesn't mean that there's some all-powerful God that is punishing us or rewarding us based on our actions, based on preferences. Essentially, karma is a cosmic law with no feeling. There's no being that has any feeling about it. So if I lie, there will be negative consequences, and there's no reason for me to feel guilty about it. If I lie, there will be consequences. It's just a fact. That's my belief system as a Buddhist. So that's a standard cultural context for when the Buddha was teaching. But here in the West, we aren't taught about karma. We aren't taught it in school. We aren't taught it in church. We aren't really taught it anywhere. We have to go find it. We have to read about it. We have to find a teacher who will teach us about it. So, but there needs to be some understanding of karma to understand the second noble truth, which speaks to the causes of suffering. So why should we in the West believe in karma? Why should we believe that? And my answer would be, we shouldn't necessarily. We shouldn't just take on blind faith that karma is true just because the Buddha said or just because some wise person said. And the Buddha taught that also. He challenged us to contemplate our own experience, to evaluate and examine our own experience, and to find out whether his teachings were true or not. So the Buddha gives us a definition of dependent origination, which really goes into quite a bit of detail about karma, cause and effect, really what we do and what the consequences of are, good and bad, and there are good or bad consequences. If I am kind, generous, patient, then there are positive karmic consequences as well. So, and maybe next week I'll go into the definition that the Buddha provides for dependent origination, but it's pretty long. So at this point, last week I gave sort of a 4,000-foot view. This week I want to give maybe a 1,000-foot view, and maybe next week I'll give a ground level view. So the 1,000-foot view of dependent origination and the causes of suffering are as follows. I would take from my first Buddhist teacher. My first Buddhist teacher was Dzogchen Khenpo Choga Rinpoche, whom I met in Boise, Idaho. I ran a Buddhist meditation center for him for 5 years, and then passed that baton on to a friend of mine, who passed it on to another friend. And so and we call him Khenpo for short, this Buddhist teacher. And so he defined dependent origination. He said interdependent origination. He defined it as follows. My present moment thinking is the reincarnation of my past moment thinking. Or to shorten that, my present thinking is the reincarnation of my past thinking. My future thinking will be the reincarnation of my present thinking. So for the present, my present thinking is the reincarnation of my past thinking. To expand that a little bit more, Khenpo taught that thinking isn't just analytical, it's also emotions, it's the voice in the mind, it's what I'm thinking about, it's what I'm analyzing, it's also my feelings, it's the whole gamut. So essentially what he's saying there is that my whole experience right now of the world is based on the way I thought and spoke and acted in the past. So the decisions that I made in the past are really dictating my experience in the present. So that probably makes a little bit of sense. And I can give some specific examples in my own life. For example, when I was in junior high, I had a humanities teacher who suggested that we should think for ourselves. We should think independently. We shouldn't do something just because everybody else is doing it. We shouldn't think something just because everybody else is thinking it. When I heard that, I was 14 years old. I was old enough to think critically to some extent. And I heard that and I thought, yeah, I like that. That makes sense to me. That resonates for me. I'm going to be an independent thinker. And I made a decision. And from that point forward, I actually have been pretty independent of a thinker. And if somebody says something, if a lot of people are saying something, if a lot of people are going in a particular direction, my first response is, well, I'm going to analyze that. I'm not going to do that just because everybody else is doing it. Another example in my case is when I was 10, I decided that I wanted to be stronger and bigger and more athletic. So I did a lot of weightlifting and running and played sports and did a lot of biking to make myself as fit as I could possibly be. And that's carried on for me today. I'm 60 years old and I jog and do yoga and exercise. So that's a decision that I made a long time ago, and it really has affected my whole life. So those are specific things that can have we can make decisions that can have big influences on our life, but it's really more than that. Basically, what we're saying with dependent origination is that our thinking patterns and our preferences and our choices right now are going to determine our whole experience of the world. So you and I and everybody else, there isn't one objective external world that everybody experiences exactly the same. Everybody sees it a little bit differently. We feel about it a little bit differently. We like different foods. We like different flowers. Some people like the ocean. Some people like the mountains. Some people like the desert. Some people like green. Some people like blue. We all have different views of the world. What determines that? Is it external factors? Well, the Buddha taught, and you can check for yourself whether you think this is true or not. Basically, he's taught that decisions that we make, thinking patterns that we adopt by choice, moment by moment, are going to determine our entire experience of the world. The amount of joy that we have, the amount of suffering that we have, the amount of grief that we have, the amount of bliss that we have, the opportunities that we have. My thinking now will determine in the future how much really the power that I have. My thinking patterns now will determine whether I think I have control over my life, over my happiness, and over my suffering. So that's basically it. Dependent origination is saying that our thinking patterns now are going to determine not just how we think in the future, but really are going to determine our entire experience. And because of that, the Buddha asserts, and this is for you to check for yourself whether you find this to be true or not, the Buddha asserts that certain thinking has negative consequences. Certain other thinking has positive consequences, suffering or happiness. And so we have a choice about that. If my thinking now is going to color my whole experience, and it's not like the thing that I think in this moment is going to entirely by itself dictate my whole experience in the future. It's my entire past experience through my whole life. If you believe in reincarnation, then back in prior lives. That's all operating to control, to determine my experience of the world. And because of that, I have power, I have choices. Because in this moment, I have some control. I don't have some control, I have control over my thinking processes. And this is where meditation comes in, because meditation is a practice where we are controlling our thinking. We are choosing to think positively, or at least neutrally, instead of negatively. We're choosing to meditate, to concentrate on something that's positive or neutral instead of meditating on anger, jealousy. I'm so angry that this person has this, I want that. Why do they have that? They don't deserve that. You know, I can meditate on that and make myself really angry and make them into an enemy in my mind. That's a negative meditation that's bad for me. You know, it's not necessarily that bad for them. They may not even know that I ever have those thoughts, but it's definitely bad for me. And I have control over that. So in the present moment, I can meditate. And there are a lot of different, many different meditation practices. It doesn't mean that you have to sit on a cushion. It doesn't mean that you have to have a particular posture. Essentially, meditation is, the way Kempo defined it, is to think. A meditation is to think something 2 or more times. And that can be positive, it can be negative. I can have a positive thought 2 or more times. That's a positive meditation. A negative thought is, I'm afraid. That has negative consequences. So right now, let's take a few moments and let's meditate. Let's meditate on our breath. Breath is a common meditation. I wouldn't necessarily call it something that we're meditating on that's positive, but it helps us develop concentration and it's neutral. So I'm not thinking about things that scare me. I'm not thinking about things that cause my cravings to increase. It's just neutral. So adopt a comfortable posture. If you have time to do this right now, you can sit in a chair. If you're comfortable sitting on a cushion, you can sit on a cushion. Hands just flat on the knees. The back is straight but not rigid. Shoulders are relaxed, neck is relaxed, and one big breath out. I'm not going to try to control the breath. I'm just going to let the breath flow in and out. And I'm just going to watch it with my mind's eye. And if other thoughts intrude, just gently let go of those thoughts, those feelings, and come back to my breath. Starts at my solar plexus, comes up through my chest, out my nose and mouth, and then back in. And like I said last week, if you're getting started in meditation, have short sessions. You know, set yourself up for victory. It's important to have a meditation session where you feel relaxed and you feel like it's something that you want to do again. The last thing that we want to do is meditate for too long where our knees are sore and we think, gosh, I don't ever want to do that again. That's not what we want. So make the meditation sessions short. And yeah, so there it is. And again, if you'd like to join me online live, go to meetup.com and look for Elk Grove Meditation and join that account, and then you can have notifications and you can get the Zoom link so we can connect with each other in real time. Thank you for joining me.